Cool, guys, let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Why on Earth episode. I would love to get into all of the nitty gritty of what this is going to be, but it's going to, at the very least, it's going to be an incredible podcast. Some of you may think this is controversial, but to Marquise and I, this is our attempt here and through all of our podcasts is to give an example of what rational, intelligent discourse looks like and to really go through thoughts and ideas and break them down and understand each other, find common ground and all of that. So today we have an incredible guest who is a dear friend of mine. This is Marquise's first time meeting him, but he has been a second father to me growing up in San Diego. He's taught me how to critically think, especially in terms of politics, and it's been an incredible example, someone I look up to. He is the Executive Vice President of Citizens for Self-Governance and Convention of States. He's an entrepreneur, and I could go down the list of all the things that Mike has done, but I would like to welcome you, Mike Ruthenberg. Thank you for coming out. We're excited to have you.
Thanks very much. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun. So Mike, our viewers do not know who you are. Can you give us a little background and just take us through your process and how life has been for you?
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, Granada Hills, to a wonderful mother and father. My father is a socialist-leaning Democrat. My mom is a very liberal Democrat. Of course, my sister is very liberal. I grew up in that household. It was a charmed life, I have to say. Ultimately moved to Santa Monica and then down to San Diego to go to San Diego State University. And it was there things started to change for me, ideologically speaking. I met a very dear friend of mine named Mark Meckler. And if you look him up, you'll see he's quite a public, outspoken figure. And I personally love him like a brother. And he challenged me to think instead of just holding my feelings in about my political ideology. He challenged me to think, and we had incredible discourse. And that discourse largely over about the next 5 years kind of turned me from being a pretty solid Democrat. I have a 17-year career in collegiate outdoor recreation, teaching leadership to college-age students. It was an amazing career, loved every minute of it. Amazing opportunity to share and shape the most important things in life with these college students at a very high thinking university, University of California at San Diego, is where I spent the last 10 years. It was also quite nice. The first 3 years I was at University of San Diego, where I met my wife now of 30 years. I have 3 amazing young men that are my children. The youngest is 19, oldest 25. It's really a pleasure to be their father and to be able to watch them grow up. They grew up with Sam, as a matter of fact, which is really wonderful. And if you hear me say Sam, go, what is the Sam thing? Well, Liam, of course, is how everybody knows this amazing young man. That's a little bit of my background. In 2009, I got involved in the Tea Party movement, largely because I didn't like what was happening with all the wasted money and the career politicians and all of the crony capitalism, things that pretty much most people will agree on aren't wonderful things when it comes to governance. And I've stayed involved ever since. And of course, I've matured and grown in that way. And I've spent most of my life as you could call me an agnostic. I grew up Jewish. My folks thought it was a great idea, my grandparents especially, who were very solid religious Jews, thought I should get a bar mitzvah. So I became a bar mitzvah when I was 13 years old. Thought it was great, learned what I need to, but it was mostly a cultural type thing. And then ultimately, just recently, I had to deal with a really serious medical issue. I've been involved with a lot of organizations, including Convention of States and Citizens for Self-Governance, where I've been surrounded by these amazing Christians. And ultimately, when I saw my mortality face me, I don't know if you can see the dent in my head, but I had a tumor about the size of a tennis ball that was flat that they removed from my head. Thank God it was not a malignant tumor. And now I'm better and I'm back to normal in that way. I've also embraced Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I am just a baby in learning my spiritual Christianity side. And that's largely what's going on with me. Is that
Awesome.
enough background for you?
Oh yeah, no, that was perfect. That's so awesome, and we're glad to hear that you are healthy. I know I personally was, following, making sure that you were good, and my family's very involved with your family, so we're glad to hear that. So you mentioned Tea Party and Convention of States, and I don't know if a lot of people know what that is. I think that there's at least if I can remember correctly, the Tea Party got a lot of backlash, and the light on the Tea Party wasn't the best. Um, and I don't know if it was a rebranding or it was a movement away from the Tea Party, but if could you give us a little background on the Tea Party and then your movement into the Convention of States? And
It's a beautiful introduction, Liam, as far as Tea Party, because when the Tea Party movement started in April of 2009, there was a bunch of, it was brand new, there was no brand. Remember, branding is all a reflection of culture. And so it was brand new, and the ideals of the Tea Party were constitutionally limited government, limit the government to what the Constitution says it should be, shouldn't be controversial. Fiscal responsibility, take care of your money, don't overspend. And then the other was free markets, that businesses should be able to operate the way they think is best. Of course, we need government to be able to regulate things across state lines and all that kind of stuff. But those are the three platforms largely of the Tea Party movement. And polling before any branding was done said 72% of all Americans agree those are good things. But over time, as you pointed out, there's a media bias. The media bias branded the Tea Party as evil, bad, not good, because a lot of people think that the conflict in politics these days is the left versus the right. And you should have, the people on the right are right and the people on the left are left. And it's like, no, that's not the real issue. The real issue right now in America is the incumbents versus us, the citizens. Those incumbents want to retain their power. They like control. It's no mistake that many people who've spent their entire life in politics are wealthy. How did that happen? They've never had jobs. And it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. This is a problem that many people agree with. And so ultimately, because the branding got kind of trashed, Mark Meckler and myself thought, let's start kind of a Tea Party 2.0. And let's move to something that doesn't have a brand, but still follow these very popular American beliefs. And we started that, and we decided we would have projects as part of this umbrella organization that you've probably never heard of, because that was the idea. We don't want to brand it, because what's going to happen, it'll get torn down by people who have a lot more money, a lot more power than us. So we started the Convention of States project based going right back to the Constitution. We want to use the Constitution to save the Constitution. And what happened is when our Constitution was formed, they put in provisions to amend the Constitution. And those amendments can be done by the legislature, or it can be done by you and everybody that's listening to this through the states, through what's called a Convention of States under Article 5. And it's a very high bar to make sure that nothing crazy happens. And we have created a project around that. And it takes 34 states to pass what's called a resolution. And that, so far, we've got 15 states that have passed it. We get to 34, we all get together to have a conversation. How do we amend the Constitution to limit the federal government, to impose fiscal restraints, and possibly term limits? Term limits are very popular nationally. So that's a little bit about how we got this Convention of States project. And we also have about 4.4 million supporters nationwide. On the way to 30 million is our target.
wow. Yeah, so Article 5, if I'm understanding it correctly, what it is it's holding government responsible and taking federal power away and giving it to the states. If I maybe said that in layman's terms, but is that pretty much what it is?
Well, Article 5 has been used uh, 27 times, largely. So remember, we have 27 amendments to the Constitution. The first 10 of them are the Bill of Rights. So a lot of people think, oh, don't mess with the Constitution. It's perfect. Well, it was perfect when they made it. Then why did they immediately need to put in our freedom of speech, our freedom of religion, protection from illegal search and seizure, and all the other things that are in our Bill of Rights? And the reason is because they forgot them. And so they had to use the legislature in order to make it happen. The reason they put the second version of Article 5 or the second provision of Article 5 in the Constitution is because there's certain things that our very wise founders thought would not ever be done by the political elite, the insiders. What if, I mean, I know this sounds a little strange now because it's the reality, but what if the federal government should become maybe a little rogue, maybe a little drunk with power, maybe overspend the money that comes in? Do you think they're going to vote to limit themselves? And the answer most people come up with is no, of course not. And so that's why in Article 5, the provision for what's called the Convention of States, the states to tell the federal government, no, remember that the federal government was designed to support the states, not the other way around. And we need to be able to tell you what you have to do when you get out of control. And that's the main reason for Article 5. And that's why we're using it.
How, you guys were under the Tea Party, and then you decided, since that got tarnished, you moved and created the Convention of States, correct?
That's right.
Now, how would you brand yourself as under a political party, or is it just like, hey, we're all these types of things? We are conservative, we are liberal, because we're constantly trying to evolve. We are how would you brand yourself right in this moment?
I'm proud to say I'm a conservative. I'm not proud to say I'm a registered Republican for practical reasons because I'm not a big fan of either side. You know, I've lived on both sides of that, as you heard a little bit earlier. And so, but my nature is, especially fiscally, I'm conservative. And that's how I look at myself. We try to be very inclusive in what we do. We try not to throw labels around at people because it's largely designed to divide us. And the worst thing that we can do as humans, as citizens, is to find differences between ourselves when there's so many things that join us. There's so many things that pull us together. I would much rather spend my time having conversation with somebody, finding things we have in common and building on that, rather than elevating myself by putting people down, saying, well, my ideology, of course, is superior to yours. That gets me nowhere unless I like to fight. And maybe if I'm intellectually strong or I'm more studied, maybe I can win. But I don't want to win. I want to have a wonderful existence in this world.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I know we get hung up on our differences, right? And I see there is a difference between the Republican Party, conservatives, maybe even libertarians, classical conservatives, but they're all grouped in. And it's the same thing we tend to group in the left with the classical liberals, with progressives and all that kind of stuff, making it all the same thing. For the purpose of this question, what is the difference between the Republicans and a conservative or something like that? Is the Republican just like the big brand, the umbrella, and then you have all of these subsets of people?
Republican is the political arm of the ideology, in my estimation. If you're in San Diego, where I'm at, and you join the Republican Party of San Diego, or you join whatever your local Republican Party, they have their own hierarchy, their structure. They have winners and losers. They pick the things they support. They pick the things that they're against. What if, as a conservative, I don't agree with the Republican Party? What do? Well, if the Republican Party just hits 100% of everything I believe, then hey, I can say it's one and the same, but that's not the case. The Republican Party is personality, it's people, it's candidates. And so for me to call myself a diehard supporter of everything Republican is something that takes away my power to think for myself. And it doesn't talk about ideology, it talks about politics.
So how you carry yourself would be conservative rather than you don't carry yourself as a Republican.
No, but make no mistake, I'd like to register in California as an independent, but you can't get a certain ballot. It's just practical.
Yeah.
Is for me to register as a Republican, but I like to think of myself as conservative, not a Republican.
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and I don't know how to go about it. And I don't know what the issues would be with it, but is there a problem with this two-party system that we have and grouping everything into those two parties? Or does there need to be an allocation of power across multiple parties? Is that even something that's viable or possible?
Well, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, because is it a two-party system when there's a Libertarian Party, there's a Green Party, there's Peace and Freedom Party, there's different parties, they don't have much traction.
Right.
And so they largely lack political clout. And some people might say in an insulting way, they lack legitimacy, when that's not necessarily true. They represent a certain ideology, certain people, and those people as groups may go in a certain way, as individuals they may go a certain way. But largely, to get to the core of your question, I think the two-party system works very well, because then you can't triangulate. Whenever we have a third candidate, an independent candidate running for president, it usually doesn't make for a happy outcome for anybody. So I think largely the two-party system works. I also think, I've seen it, it creates a balance. And hopefully when things work, maybe the pendulum swings one way and then it swings the other way. And so we wind up a little bit more in the middle, which is all good. Again, I may not agree with the guy next door, but maybe I'm not right. And maybe I have my way. And maybe it's time for him to have his way a little bit. And then that tends to make things work. And it's one of the things that dismays me the most right now is the polarization that's happening. The extreme left, the extreme right, is the way a lot of people think of it. And the lack of people being able to have civil discourse about things that really matter. And I could get into the reasons I think there are behind that.
Actually, please do. Please do.
Okay.
That was going to be my next question. What do you think the reasons are for this kind of?
Okay, well, if you guys want controversy, this is where it's going to come.
Oh yeah, no, we're all for it, because we're having an intellectual conversation. It's okay to have some controversy.
Well, when it comes to obviously I picked a side. I'm a conservative. And if I felt like being a liberal was a wonderful thing, then that's the side I'd pick. So the thing that I'm seeing right now is, for generations, not just for the last 5 years, although we're seeing a very rapid change in our culture, our society, but for generations. And one of the things that you said, Liam, before we got on air, which I think is so critical, is politics is downstream of culture. When you think about that, I paused on purpose, because culture is so powerful. And so think about what culture is. Culture is largely through communication. Hollywood creates tremendous culture. Hollywood is controlled almost completely by the left. And it would be very difficult for people, maybe Democrats or people on the left are proud of that. And frankly, they should be, because they control a powerful message medium, and that's controlled by the left. Education, largely controlled by the left. And that's not just the last few years. This is for generations, since World War II.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that there's the Democrat Party, which finds tremendous unity. They're incredibly well organized, communicate very well, and communicate on ways that create amazing unity. And when you put those three things together, they they create the culture and dominate the politics. And that's largely what's happening right now. And if you look and see about where that goes into the future, the best example right now of where this is leading, and we're seeing this acceleration right now, is look at Venezuela. Venezuela, if you look it up, still says it's a presidential republic, but in fact it's not. It's a totalitarian regime. Maduro runs that place, and it went very rapidly, call it 2018 to 2019, from one of the wealthiest countries in America, in all the Americas, I should say, they had all this oil. And now with the corruption and the consolidation of power, people are eating their cats and dogs because they're starving. There is complete abject poverty going on in Venezuela. There's no freedom anymore. And that's based on the myth of socialism, which now has turned into totalitarianism. And that's something I'm very concerned about here. And one of the things that I see right now is an acceleration in that direction. And it's largely driven by culture. And, you know, you make your own conclusions of where that's coming from.
I'm glad you mentioned, glad you mentioned the fact that you believe the two-party system is working. Because in many conversations Liam and I have, I voiced frustrations about just like, I don't know, I feel like it's not fair that, you know, there usually isn't a third candidate. You know, it usually gets like absorbed into one of the other two. And to me, that seems problematic for many reasons, just because we've got to kind of adjust our ideologies in order to fit into a certain category, right? And as we move towards the future, I know that we shouldn't tear down the whole system as it is, right? So you taught me something just now. I really appreciate that I can be all of these different things. I can have sort of conservative values in terms of faith. You know, it's not necessarily Bible or Christian based. However, it is just very much so, you know, the like 10 Commandments. I live that every day of my life. I have liberal views. I have very like libertarian views where I believe that education is the way. I have other views where the government needs to stay out of my business and the family should take care of certain things that they teach their kids. So there is a lot going on, and the fact that you sort of reinvigorated a little hope for me that this two-party system isn't total shit. It does work, at least for now. And as we move towards the future, perhaps it'll change, but it doesn't need to change radically, you know, at this moment where we tear down these Democrat and Republican titles, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love hearing what you're saying. When we started Citizens for Self-Governance, that organization, which we kind of codenamed Tea Party 2.0, you know, the slogan, you know, if you drive a BMW, the ultimate driving machine, it describes that car. If you love to drive, you have the ultimate driving machine. And we wanted to come up with a slogan like that for Citizens for Self-Governance. That's a high bar. The only one we could come up with is who decides. You think, who decides? What does that mean? And what we stand for is who decides. And in America, we believe that who decides is more important than what is decided. So what I mean by that is if you live in Los Angeles and some bureaucrat from some other state, maybe on the Eastern Seaboard, it doesn't matter where or what their ideology is, decides what your schooling is going to be like and how that's going to work, the chances that they're going to get it right are much more slim than if maybe a local school board decides how your school should be. And we believe that people closest to you, close to the people that will be governed by governance, make better decisions than those far, far away. So we believe in self-governance, Citizens for Self-Governance. The family unit, that's a great governing body. The parents should know best about what happens with the kids. And maybe it's your neighborhood, maybe it's your town, maybe it's your city, maybe it's your county, your state. But the governance should be as close to the people that are ruled by it or that are governed by it in order to make the decisions the best. And so when you have the federal government just grabbing more and more and more and more power, and they're taking the Constitution. Most people have never seen this book. 3,000 pages. This is the Constitution of the United States of America. And most people hold that tiny little paper thing, right? And say, wait, that's the Constitution. You know, what that book I just showed you is every Supreme Court decision that has expanded the federal government's grab of what can happen. It's huge. There are so many rules now. There's so many policies, so many laws that have been decided by the Supreme Court. And that is one of our issues here in America, the whole idea of you should be able to decide for yourself and govern yourself, very libertarian view, which I love. And it's going away, and we need to be aware of that and pay attention.
Yeah, there's a very popular movement, excuse me, especially amongst millennials, of a move towards socialism under the guise of democratic socialism, where we're giving more power to the federal government to make those decisions. So really, you're in
exchange for security.
Yeah, and you're in complete opposition of that. And Citizens for Self-Governments and Convention of States is bringing that power back home to the places that it matters, and not letting selfish bureaucrats decide it for us on the East Coast. I think this goes back into what you were saying about the generational ideology, or the generational ideas that have been in our school systems, throughout our media, that have then really cultivated, especially in our generation. How do you think that we can, because I'm completely with you. I want states' rights. I don't like this big, powerful government. And I don't think that was ever, that's not what the founders wanted, it was powerful government. How do we move back to the understanding that our individual rights matter and our states' rights matter more than having a big government?
It sounds, maybe this is the answer, maybe it's not the answer you're thinking might come, but the answer is simply to love each other. And you think, what does that mean? Well, it means that we need to care about each other as people and try to understand and listen to where people are coming from, find out where they are coming from. You know, I could talk about the fact that I think our education system is broken, and I don't know if a whole podcast could go on the cancel culture, which we don't need to talk about denying history, which is the best indicator of the future. As far as I'm concerned, you just go back and take a look at what happened before, and hopefully as a result, you don't repeat that. But the most important thing right now, today, is for people to love each other, care about each other enough to listen and not go into an argument or a disagreement deciding, I got to win this thing. Because what will happen there is, if it's you have maybe a conversation on social media, and then you go back after you feel like you won that thing, and you read it, I hope many times people will go back and read and self-evaluate, right? Because we all are act, learn, adjust animals. We act, we learn from that, and hopefully we adjust. That's how we grow. And so hopefully, if you're reading what you wrote, then you go back and say, wow, that was ugly. What I said, that's hard to swallow. But I was right, so it doesn't matter that it was ugly or that it was demeaning or that I now have somebody that hates me. Who cares? I was right. That's not what it's about. You're not going to get your point across, and we're not going to heal this world by winning debates.
One thing Liam and I talk about often is that, in that same tone of voice, the people who are being heard are the ones who are being the loudest. And I think most people think, like, in our generation specifically, like, across the board, think more like Liam and I think. You know, you are out, I'd say just Liam and I, because you're out there doing the action. And we have not yet gotten there. We have not yet chosen that path. But the people who are being heard are being the loudest. And the rest of us are just like, oh, wow, I don't think that really. But, like, I'm just going to stay home and, like, let this happen, you know, because it seems so huge. But to some people, they're so passionate about it that they're willing to put themselves out there and be loud and be heard, which is great. You know, finding some sort of balance and temperament within that would be also amazing. So how would you, what would be one call to action that you would ask of not only your generation, but millennials who are soon going to be moving into these positions of power, and running the world, what would be one thing that you, as the Convention of States, what would you call to action for us?
How about three things?
Yeah.
Be humble. What does humble mean? It means you have to be willing to learn and be wrong. The next thing is seek the truth. Find out what's real and verify the best of your ability. And then the third thing is vote. Go and vote your conscience. And if people do that, we have a whole different place.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. On this topic of solutions, but going back actually a little bit, what do you think has gotten us away from, like, the biggest point of contention between conservatives or the left and the right? Actually, conservatives and liberals, I feel like, differ slightly, classical, but we've moved so far left and right. And why do you think that is? Is it just a pendulum swing and it's just gotten bigger and bigger, or is it those generational ideas? Or what would you say is the biggest contention right now?
I don't know how we got to where we're at, but I know the thing that's stoking the flames right now, and the media is a big problem. Entertainment, Hollywood. I mentioned this before. It's worth mentioning again that people don't understand they're being programmed. And fear is a powerful motivator. There is so much fear right now in America. I have never seen so much fear. It's driving people to do things that we never, ever thought would happen in this great country we live in. And that is stoked by the media. You can see it if you really dig in. You can see the bias that comes out. You can see the half-truths. And there is an absolute goal that is set. Now, it'd be presumptuous of me to say I know exactly what they think or what they want, and to say they as one unified body is really overstating the sophistication of anybody or any system, because you have a whole bunch of individuals making decisions, but they're lining up. That's the culture part, right? Everyone's wearing the same clothes. That's culture. Everyone's saying the same thing. That's culture. And the media is a driver of that message. It makes it sexy, or it deals with our innermost fears and our innermost values. And what's happening is we are being driven largely to the left right now because of the power that education, the media, and the left, the Democrat Party, have. And it's unfortunate that it's going that way. And you might say, well, gosh, it went right. And we could talk about that. But the things that I think are the biggest issue is, if you look at what's happening today, look at the monuments that are being torn down, which is really, to me, just a crying shame. Gosh, that was happening in Venezuela not very long ago. And the people then were thinking, it's not that big a deal. I'm still happy. I have plenty of food, plenty of money. We're in a rich country. We have all this oil. Don't worry about that. Well, that's part of canceling what's happened in the past so you can create the future that you want. And that's done by some groups of people that are aligned, that are culturally thinking the same thing. And largely, I think that's what's happening here in America. And I'm concerned. And the antidote, again, is to be aware. Start looking for truth and seeing what it is. Don't look towards the mainstream media to do that. Dig in, find out things, have conversation with people, disagree. Suppose you can be wrong. Goes back to the humility thing. And that's how we fix this thing. And then, of course, speak up and being active. I'm in an organization of activists. Yeah, and remember that these opinions are my opinions. They're not necessarily the opinions of the organization. But the most important thing to me is that people do what they can do. The average age of our organization is quite advanced. Many of those people can't go out and march. Many of those people are in the group, the COVID group, that needs to be particularly careful to not get sick when they go and do things face to face. Some people, they write a handwritten note to their legislator. And it may not seem like it's that much, but it's huge. If you flood handwritten notes into a legislator, they're going to pay attention, especially if you're their constituent, because it's so hard to get letters if you're an activist organization. How do you get 5,000 people to sit down and write a letter? It doesn't happen. And unless it's just crazy and people are that fired up. And generationally, nobody's like, I don't even know how to write in cursive. I print because they don't teach cursive in school anymore. And whatever it is, it's just different nowadays. But the point is everybody should do what they can do. Maybe it's just joining some groups and educating yourself and voting. Maybe you're the one that's going to go stand and protest. Maybe you're the one that's going to write a letter. Maybe you're very elegant. Maybe you're a speaker. Maybe you can present something. Maybe you can join a group. The most important thing is just to give however much time you have. Maybe you've got 3 jobs and you're trying to make ends meet. You got a family that you're raising or a dog that takes all your time. Whatever it is, just take whatever time you have and put your mind to it and know that if you are educated, you're part of the solution.
Yes. And then the power of how you explained in the beginning, and Marquise touched on it, of going into conversations, trying to make a friend rather than trying to be right. I think with all of those things, we can really transform and bring the pendulum a little bit back to center, because I do find more often than not through having conversations is we're not that radicalized. It seems as though we are. And there are some ideas that we have. It's like, somebody my age, the revolution might be nice because all I'm seeing is negativity and just, and corruption, and I don't like Trump. And so, yeah, maybe we turn the whole thing upside down, but don't really know how to do that. And there's a movement for it. So, hey, let's go do it. But so I'm finding that a lot of people have the ability to think, have the ability to look past the buzzwords and the headlines and actually do some deep digging, looking for truth. The activism is there, with especially a lot of young people. It's maybe not in the right areas or done in the most in the best way, but it's there. But having the willingness to have those conversations, and that's really what we actually wanted to do today, is the willingness to have a conversation with somebody we may disagree with. It seems like we agree on more things than we disagree with. And but we attach these labels that give us these views, and it's come down to me, or in my mind, it's come down to a good versus evil dichotomy, where we see us, or my views as virtuous and good, and the opposite, therefore, is evil. And so from there is no common ground. But if we bring it back to looking for a friend, seeking that common ground, then we can advance and actually make the change that we want in the correct ways.
I'm with you.
And one thing that we feel is that it's a lot of it's up to our generation. I keep going back to this. I know, of course, your generation is going to be here for a long, long time. We hope and we pray, because we need your guys' guidance. And at the same time, I notice within your generation, my parents, people I work with at different schools, they will not talk to, I'm in Hollywood, they will not talk to a Republican. They're like, I don't even know how you can have conversations like that, Marquise. And I'm like, well, that's exactly why I'm having the conversation, because you've spent 30 years like avoiding these people, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And so, when Liam and I first started this podcast, our very first episode, which is no longer up, and I was even like worried about it when we put it up, I was like, revolution, communism, why not? And then Liam really did a deep dive and changed my mind. He's like, I see why you think this way, Marquise. I was there a couple months ago, but when we really think about the implications of more government and socialism, we can see from the past what has happened. And my argument was always, no, but this time will be different. And I'm sure that's what they thought every single time. So, call to action for our viewers, Liam and I have not yet taken this action either, but one thing that we talk about is if we're going to be exploring this type of stuff and we want to invoke change, then we have to not just vote in national elections, but vote for our congressmen, senators, our city council people, go to the city council meetings, write letters, so many things that we can do rather than sit back, watch the media and complain about it.
Yeah.
Boy, you're just singing my song. You're making me happy. I have tremendous hope. I don't think we're doomed. I don't think that we're headed to a place where we're never coming back from. I have faith in the next generation. I know so many, we have a internship program here, and this last school year, they last an entire school year, about 14 incredibly brilliant college students in that have revolutionized a lot of the things that we do. There's so much brilliance in there. There's so much passion. There's so much going on that a lot of people, especially in my generation and older, say, oh yeah, well, those days are gone for good, and you may as well give up having a great quality of life for your kids or your grandkids. I don't believe that for a second. I believe that we have a very bright future ahead of us, and I think this is just an opportunity. Why are we here right now? Why did God give us this test run? Well, it's making us stronger. Everything that tests us makes us stronger, and it makes us think, and it's getting our attention. Many people aren't paying any attention. If you're asleep while your legislature is changing things, then all of a sudden you wake up to a different world. Now people aren't asleep, they're awake, and the natives are restless. It's loud out. I love it.
Yeah, I love it. I love this conversation. Mike, for people that want to learn more about Citizens for Self-Governance and Convention of States, how can they, and learn more about you and also Mark Meckler, how can they do that?
The simplest way is just go to conventionofstates.com, and that's the website for Convention of States Project. We have a Citizens for Self-Governance website as well called selfgovern.com, and there you can get a feel for what's going on with Citizens for Self-Governance as well.
Awesome. And all that information we will have in the link or in the caption comment section below. Something like that. Whatever YouTube does. But yeah, thank you so much, Mike, for joining us in this conversation. We were excited for it. It's met all of our expectations and more. I'm excited to release this and see what people think. I do think that there's a lot of people that think like us.
Very interested as well. Marquise, it was really a pleasure to meet you, and I would love to continue our conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. We appreciate you.
It's mutual.
All right, guys. Thank you for watching Why on Earth. See you next time.